More than 75 days and counting after the Islamic Republic imposed internet shutdown on the Iranian people. Tens of millions remain cut off from the outside world. What has been the impact of this digital isolation, and what does it reveal about human conditions inside Iran today? Joining me is Dagres, Senior Fellow at the Washington Institute and curator of the Iranist.
Clearly, they're trying to send this message of normalcy and that people inside the country love the regime, and whatever happened in January, not only was it something that didn't happen, but they've been actually allegedly blaming Israel and the United States for those events in January.
Operation Epic Fury may be over. Operation Economic Fury, however, is just getting started. What's next for Iran's economy under mounting pressure and uncertainty? Siamak Javadi joins me from Texas University to discuss the economic outlook ahead.
If nothing fundamentally changes, hyperinflation, financial instability, full-fledged macroeconomic crisis is not probable, it's inevitable.
My name is Mohamad Machine-Chian, filling in for my colleague Negar Mojtahedi. Welcome to Eye for Iran. Joining us is Dagres, Senior Fellow at Washington Institute and the curator of the Iranist on Substack, who has been following the internet shutdown very closely and has written about it. Welcome, Holly.
Thank you for having me, Mohammed.
First of all, let's explore this. What does life look like when an entire society is pushed into a digital blackout, I guess, in the 21st century?
Well, we're all glued to our phones regardless of what part of the world we're in. And for Iranians, it's no different. But imagine that you're no longer able to message your family and friends abroad, that you're not able to access Instagram or X or Twitter. And that's what Iranians are facing in this moment. And it's been really hard for them. This is actually the 5th state-imposed internet shutdown, but it's also the longest globally, according to NetBlocks. And of course, it began on February 28th when the war began. And so for them, it's a really tough feeling. And granted, I should caveat that there is domestic internet working. So if you want to do your banking or use a ride-sharing app like Snap, which is like the Iranian equivalent to Uber, you can do that. But those real basic things that we here in the West take for granted no longer exist. And that's been really hard, especially for those of us diaspora Iranians on the outside who are so used to sending day-to-day text messages with family and friends in Iran and having group conversations and family chats or sharing jokes even. And so that disconnectivity has really been hard for both sides of the ocean.
Officials of the Islamic Republic usually tend to justify this blackout as a security issue. Of course, even last year during the 12-day war, they said the drones are hijacking the operators on the ground, and for that they had to shut down internet. But this time around, people are arguing that F-35s are not really hijacking your mobile operators anymore. What is the regime afraid of? Is, I guess, what I'm asking. How can they justify it anymore?
Well, I think that part of their argument, to your point, Mohammed, is that they claim that this is there's a fear of cyber attacks. But when you look at the big picture, it's really about controlling the narrative, controlling the information space and how Iranians inside the country feel in this moment. And it's clear when they're offering white SIMs to pro-regime journalists, analysts, and even Western social media influencers that are visiting the country to whitewash the events of January, for instance, which were the anti-regime uprising that resulted in the unprecedented massacre of tens of thousands of Iranians. And so when you look at that, you say, well, I guess it's really not about national security. It's about who you decide gets control of the internet. And so we're seeing this digital inequality play out right now in this information space. And really, what it comes down to is a fear of its people speaking out. We've seen this for years now. It started with the 2009 post-election protests known as the Green Movement. And it was really then that the Islamic Republic started viewing the internet and social media as a national security threat. And so over the years, they've been implementing blocking of websites. 35% of the most visited websites globally, including all social media platforms, are blocked. And so Iranians have been using circumvention tools to get online. So this isn't really new, but this is taking it to a new extreme or a new normal.
Absolutely. Let's keep a moment on this. You mentioned something interesting. You mentioned white SIM cards. Can you elaborate on that? What are they? How are they implemented and used these days?
So we actually didn't know this existed until recent months. So X actually put out a new thing where you can see where someone's located. And we started seeing that Iranian officials or analysts, when you look to their location, it would say West Asia or Iran, which was really shocking because we're like, well, how? Everybody's using a VPN to get online. And so that really showed this discrepancy of how people that are working with the regime are actually getting access to online than compared to an ordinary Iranian, where you would see that because of their VPN, they would show up in the US or Germany or even Thailand. And so that was what really stood out when this news broke. And so it's been going on for a long time now. And I think it's really important because when you look at this information space, and during this war especially, it's only one version of events you're getting out, their narrative. Their narrative is that everyone's rallying around the flag of the Islamic Republic, everybody supports the Islamic Republic, and they're putting out these images of many pro-regime rallies. And of course, if we watch Iran very carefully, they're even showing women without mandatory hijab, saying that they support the regime. And we all know that that is a violation of mandatory hijab rules. And historically, that wasn't the case. So clearly, they're trying to send this message of normalcy and that people inside the country love the regime. And whatever happened in January, not only was it something that didn't happen, but they've been actually allegedly blaming Israel and the United States for those events in January.
That's a good point. And one question occurs to me is that what does it say about the relationship between Iranian people and the Islamic Republic regime? This behavior every time something happens. So this time around, there's a war. US and Israel attacked the Islamic Republic and they shut down internet on their own people. What does it say about this relationship between the people and the state?
Well, I think what it says is that it's clear that the people are not the same as the Islamic Republic. We've seen these cyclical anti-regime protests for years now. Most famously, everybody remembers the 2022 Women Life Freedom Uprising, and of course, the January uprising. And so when you're seeing that they're trying to control the information space when they're shutting down the internet, it means that they want to make sure that their people can't speak. And they're trying to censor these voices and to show the world what they think is right and what the narrative of the Islamic Republic. And so if we heard what Iranians felt in this moment, which we did before the war, is that they wanted the Islamic Republic gone. That's why they went out to the streets in January. They would also complain about these double standards in this moment. Of course, there are some Iranians who are spending exuberant amounts of their money or their income just to get these Internet Pro VPNs, which are these state-issued VPNs that allow Iranians to get online, which are unstable and also monitored. And the little bit we've been hearing from Iranians that I've been also talking to, and even what we've been seeing online, is that a lot of complaints about this internet, complaint that Why is it that I have to spend all this money just to say hello to my family on FaceTime or WhatsApp video and make sure that they know I'm okay, and just to see their face and hang up a minute later because it's so expensive, because the connection's unstable? And there's a lot of these complaints across the board. And I remember journalist Negar Mojtahedi, who famously reported on Mahsa Jina Amini's killing and went to prison for it. She said that it took her so long, after 50 days, to get online. And she was like, wow. And it was at a time when Google search started working in Iran. And she was like, wow, like we're excited just so we can use Google search. Like, why is it that we're getting excited over something so small that should be the norm? And I think that really highlights the frustrations of Iranians in this moment. And then, of course, the state of the economy and how this internet shutdown has impacted them.
The other thing is, at the same time, internet was shut down on Iranian people, but at the same time, the Islamic Republic had I think it's safe to call it a large campaign in the free world, distributing, publishing, posting AI-generated Lego, I guess, propaganda pieces and things of that sort. Have you looked into that? Do you have any take on that, on those efforts?
Well, the AI-generated Lego videos really stood out because I was shocked to see how many Americans eating them up, that they were so excited by them. So if you were anti-Trump or anti-war, they really resonated. And they were going viral as a result because people thought they were clever and that the raps were funny, and they were noticing even the attention to detail about things that were really American domestic politics focused. But when you look deeper, it was actually that the team behind Explosive Media had actually gotten an Iranian government contract to do this. And then we also saw at the same time Iranian embassy accounts were also putting out memes and jokes. And so it became clear that this was a campaign, a propaganda campaign to discredit the United States during this war, and one that really worked to their benefit. And I would argue and say that I think the Islamic Republic won the narrative war. And it's because of these really clever videos and posts online. And, you know, the other side of the coin is I think they've also won much of the global South with this. If you pay very close attention to some of the Iranian embassy accounts in some of these global South countries, they've been leaning into colonialism and anti-imperialism, things that maybe won't resonate with the average American, but will resonate with individuals from the global South.
And how devastating these shutdowns has been on Iran's economy, because we know Iran's economy has already been afflicted by inflation. They have other problems. There's a blockade going on top of sanctions. How does this affect, especially in the economic sense, ordinary Iranians' lives?
So I had been studying this for some time, and I wrote a report called Iranians on #social media. And when I published that in early 2022, what I found was that 11 million Iranians had online businesses. Many of them were Iranian women who were trying to become financially independent. They were selling handicrafts or doing catering, or they were becoming Instagram influencers. And so that became a real important amount of income for Iranians across the board. And this internet shutdown has gravely impacted people. Iranian officials themselves say that 20% of its 30 million workforce has been impacted by this internet shutdown. We've also seen the e-commerce world, like Iranian versions of Amazon, of Netflix, of Uber, all be impacted, and hundreds of jobs have actually been lost due to this blackout.
How about the human rights aspect of this issue, internet blockade issue? Because we know in the past protests and by the Iranian people, internet played a very important role for reporting crimes committed and documenting what happens to the Iranian people, especially during even January uprising of the Iranian people. We know they committed a great deal of crimes, and after that, during a very small period that Iranian people had access to internet, we received tens of thousands of documents. But to me, it seems like one of the reasons that the Islamic Republic is shutting down the internet. What do you think?
Well, I think absolutely. We saw this during Aban Khunin, or the bloody 2019 November protests. The Islamic Republic used the dark cover of an internet shutdown to kill, according to Reuters, 1,500 protesters. And then we saw this in January yet again, within a span of, I believe, 48 hours on January 8th and 9th. We saw that our understanding of the information before the shutdown, numbers in the streets that we haven't seen in decades, and that was when they shut down the internet yet again. And under that dark cover, then they committed those mass atrocities in this unprecedented massacre of tens of thousands of Iranians. And we know this to be true because of those Starlink users that were leaking a lot of the video and footage. And of course, anecdotally speaking, we had eventually, if you remember, the landlines weren't even working at the time. But when they went back on and families were able to call from Iran to the West, not the other way around, some people risked their security and started describing the horrific scenes that they had witnessed, and people started recording their families talking about it, and those were being shared in the diaspora on Instagram. And I think during that time with the internet shutdown, one of the most famous and gut-wrenching videos was Seper Baba Kojai, which was this father of, I believe, a Gen Z Iranian named Seper going through one of the morgues looking for his son. It was almost like a mini documentary that was 12 minutes long of just horrific scenes, because there were so many bodies that they were just leaving them on the floor for people to identify. And so it's stuff like that that really, when you're living under an authoritarian regime like the Islamic Republic, is so integral. These citizen journalists that have played a key role since the 2009 Green Movement in documenting even the death of Neda Agha Sultan at that time. And so when I see this shutdown happening that may be permanent, and some people here are normalizing in the West, it's not only disturbing, but it's worrisome, because we won't really get a full picture moving ahead. And that's exactly what the Islamic Republic wants, is for us to see the picture that they give them and not what the Iranian people want the world to see. And they're effectively silencing them by doing that.
Experts warned that Tehran was moving toward an, I guess, domestic intranet. They called it national internet. The Islamic Republic did. Do you think this is the same project at its final stages, or at least is it moving toward that goal?
Well, we've been saying for years now that the intranet's been 90% done. I think in some ways it already has been functioning, as I noted earlier. Banking, ride-hailing and whatnot are possible under the domestic internet. And there also are domestic apps, like there's domestic messaging apps like Bale, which functions like between Facebook and WhatsApp. And it's this very big social media platform, but the caveat, of course, is it's monitored. One of the running jokes I saw in recent months was somebody said that they got in a fight with their girlfriend, and then Iranian intelligence called them and said, you know, I agree with your girlfriend, you need to apologize. So I think it's really widely known amongst Iranians that, you know, these apps are being monitored, and to be careful what you say and do on them. But, you know, I remember when they were passing an internet protection bill in 2021, Iranians were really worried about what that would look like, and they started comparing themselves to North Korea. And I think that it's not really hyperbolic anymore to put themselves in that box, because now they've basically, this seems like this might become the new normal, where only an elite few will have access to the outside world, and everybody else will be living behind this digital wall. That's really devastating, not just from a psychological standpoint, but an economic one.
Oh, thank you so much, Holly Dagres, for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Joining me is Dr. Siamak Javadi from Texas University. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here with you.
Thank you. After the 12-day war, the Iranian rial lost more than half of its value. Now, after the second war, is it possible for the same pattern to be repeated? And if so, what's going to happen? What are the likely scenarios ahead?
So to answer this question, I think it's imperative to examine the Iranian economy's situation prior getting to the war. So Iranian economy was already in shambles before the 12-day war and before the, this 40-day war. We know, since the most recent wave of sanctions went into effect, Iranian currency has been on a free fall. There has been some ups and downs. The depreciation slowed down in certain episodes and certain timeframes. But overall, we saw that Iranian currency has been depreciating across the board, across pretty much all currencies. So this is not a new phenomenon. So, and this reflects a larger problem with the Iranian economy that has really nothing to do with the war itself. It has to do with the structural issues, the corruption, the fiscal imbalance, and the fiscal budget deficit the government is running, and the money printing mechanism of the government to finance this deficit. I can go on and on and on for all these reasons that has contributed to the depreciation. But what happened during the war, on top of all of these pre-existing conditions, is that it basically, overnight, Iran access to oil revenue kind of evaporated. So that was one of the ways that historically, conventionally, whatever adjective you want to use, the central bank used to intervene in the foreign currency market to prevent or at least try to slow down the depreciation of the currency. In fact, even their own preferential, exchange rate always followed the market rate with some lag. You could look at the figures. That one is also depreciating against dollars, but with some lag. So what happened during the war is that you have a massive shock to the supply side economy because the production side was basically down. And this, again, is not really confined to the war. This has started from about 18 months ago when the, energy imbalance passed the tipping point that they had to shut down productions in Iran. And that, brought about an adverse shock to the aggregate supply. So that would, take the economy to a stagflation, or perhaps I should say that it deepened the existing stagflation. So this resulted into an acceleration of depreciation of rial or toman against the US dollar. And unless something fundamentally changes with the way that the Iranian regime handles the economy, their governance, their attitude towards foreign policy, if there is no breakthrough and we just, look at this whole thing as business as usual, status quo, I don't see any glimpse of hope on the horizon. I think the currency, there is no other way because, all the fundamental forces, all the indicators suggest that the currency is just simply going to depreciate. And these are just fundamental forces, and no country in the history of the world has been able to overcome fundamental forces of economy, and Iran certainly is not an exception. So I think the combination of fiscal deficit, corruption, the capital flight, adverse shock to the aggregate supply, and then the inflationary way of financing the war by, basically borrowing from the banking system and borrowing from the Federal Reserve. No, I shouldn't say Federal Reserve, the Central Bank of Iran, which basically means printing money. So all of these combined, basically leave no room for the Iranian currency to any room other than just to depreciate. So I think this is just going to continue, unfortunately.
Oh, that's a good point. And you mentioned a relatively long list, and rightly so. You touched on that. The list goes on and on.
It's very unfortunate, really. It's very unfortunate.
Another bullet point on that list is the internet shutdown. And internet has been cut off for the past 75 plus days in Iran. I want to ask you how badly this internet shutdown has impacted, especially young entrepreneurs, small businesses, and the private sector in general.
This is unbelievable what they're doing right now. I can't only imagine what people in Iran are going through. I had a hiccup in my internet connection just a couple hours ago for going to an interview. And I was like, how people in Iran are coping with the current situation. Their own estimate. This is not me. This is not Iran International or any other think tanks. This is their own estimate. Every minute of internet shutdown costs about $1.5 million of direct costs to the Iranian economy. And remember the context. We are not talking about an economy that was operating normally and then entered into a war, and it has flexibility and it has resilience. You're not talking about the Russian economy at the time it invaded Ukraine, where when it faced sanctions, its currency depreciated, but it has had resilience. It came back up again in a couple of weeks. Of course, right now, Russian economy is going down because of the sanctions over the years. But my point being is that the Iranian economy was already in shambles, and they are inflicting even more damage to the economy by shutting down internet. So when you combine direct cost and indirect costs is even more, like how many jobs are going to be lost, and the multiplier effect of it. It creates a domino effect, a ripple effect across the economy. It kills jobs, it kills opportunities, it kills planning. If there was any project that they were thinking about undertaking, those projects are going to basically shut down, and that creates like this domino effect that would just propagate through the economy. So their own estimate is about $80 million a day. So, and how many days has it been? Let's say 80 days. So 80 days multiplied by 80 million. So you're looking at $640 million roughly, or 6.4 billion.
Yeah.
So it's enormous. Like the cost is enormous. And then we have to understand the nature and the structure of the Iranian economy. As a developing economy, SMEs stand for small, medium-sized enterprises. These are the backbone of the economy. Even in the US, the largest capital market in the world, the most capitalist society with companies that are larger than GDP of small countries in Africa, even in the US, small businesses are protected. They are given some priorities when it comes to access to capital. In fact, during the COVID pandemic, you remember, US government allocated funds specifically for small businesses. And what is Islamic Republic doing? In a context where the economy is in shambles, we have aggregate supply shock, we are in a stagflation, the currency is depreciating. They shut down internet. So it's like deliberately killing the economy. And they are making it like a security issue. They don't. So, and this basically advances this idea that for Islamic Republic, economy and people's livelihood is not a priority, is not the second priority, is not the third priority. Even in their negotiations with the US, you can see this pattern. They are pushing for a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. During this very same period that we were in war, the currency was depreciating, the internet is down, people are in desperate need of capital to just, make the ends meet. They are sending cash to Lebanon, to Hezbollah. Iran International reported on this. So it's just, I'm lost for words how I can characterize this. This is like a deliberate, sober decision to kill the economy and basically keep people to fight for their basic necessities. it's like the Maslow's, pyramid. You keep people on the base. You don't allow them to, be elevated to higher and higher levels. So they're at the base. They need to be dealing with basic necessities, food and shelter and, your rent and your bills. And you won't have time to think about other stuff. And that seems to be a policy that is working for them behind the mask of security. We are in war, and this is for security purposes. They're selling internet. They're selling wide internet at astronomical prices to others. So I think that's completely a bogus argument from their side.
No, absolutely. I completely
That was a very long answer.
Nonetheless, remains true. The Islamic Republic relies on oil and petrochemical revenues. Even before the Second War began, the renewed maximum pressure policy basically made their revenue model and their shadow fleet unsustainable. Now there's a blockade. Is the Islamic Republic on a clock? What do you think about this?
So, Islamic Republic is definitely on a clock. I think that is for sure. There are estimates suggesting that every day of blockade is costing them about $450 million, give or take. So let's round it up to 500 just for the sake of calculation. So you're talking about somewhere between 13 to 15 billion dollars, 12 to 15 billion dollars per month. That's substantial for an economy that is like between 350 billion to 400 billion dollar GDP. Monthly revenue loss, income loss of about 12 to 13 billion dollars is quite a lot. And on top of it, they cannot, export their oil. Access to the, oil revenue is getting more and more limited and more costly and inefficient for them. We have the Treasury Department secretary on record multiple times saying he's stating that, indicating that the Treasury Department is going to track the money and they're going to block it from, Islamic Republic from accessing it. They're going to hold it for the Iranian people. So I think from that angle, they are on a clock. And then you need to understand that they didn't have enough reserves going into the war. Yes, during the Biden administration, sanctions were not enforced the way they were supposed to, although they didn't change the books. So on the books, there was this congressional testimony by Anthony Blinken when he was the Secretary of State that, hey, we didn't change the books, but it was kind of a misleading statement. That is true that they didn't change the books during the Biden administration, but the enforcement was kind of lax. They didn't really enforce. And that is reflected in the data. We could see the reserve, the foreign reserve started to accumulate. So it nosedived during the Trump administration, first term. And then during the Biden administration, they started to accumulate. But obviously it didn't get to the point of, at the beginning of the first Trump term. So now they need to tap into those resources. They don't have access to oil revenue. It's very limited. They do not have tax revenue. I mean, the economy is in almost complete shutdown right now. We just talked about the internet. The small businesses, they are shut down. 2 million jobs have been destroyed. I'm not going to even go over the psychological effect of this. So all of this combined suggests that in terms of access to resources to run the country in a meaningful way, they are really on a clock. They may not be able to even pay their own security forces and, their institution of suppression. So probably they're going to cut back on paying the pensions to the retirees. They're already floating that idea that, hey, we're running low on the resources, so we pay you this much. And then if we get enough resources, we pay you, the balance next month. But we have to understand that for Islamic Republic does not operate in a paradigm that a normal government operates. So they may run out of money to run a business in a normal way, but it doesn't matter to them. They don't simply care. it doesn't matter if the country is not, run normally. As long as they can finance their security forces, they will hold on to power, and it doesn't matter. I think this, if the blockade continues, eventually we will get to a point that even paying their security forces will become an issue. I think there was a report by CIA and some other intelligence, community people in the U.S. that the Iranian government may tolerate the blockade for 3 to 4 months. But nobody has actually seen the report, so I can't comment on the content. But my guess is that this is what they're talking about, that they are willing to cut back on paying the retirees. The economy is just going to get completely flushed down the toilet. You're going to have famine. You're going to have people basically not being able to buy the necessities. We already have problems with people accessing medication. So the Islamic Republic simply doesn't care about that. So I think they may be able to tolerate this for a while because for them, it's just a narrow group of people who need to be financed. And this is basically their security forces. But if this continues, my guess is that it's going to become an issue even to pay those people. Of course, we're not discussing the risk of, social uprising because, there's always this potential that, there is going to be another uprising because of this massive dissatisfaction with the, mismanagement of the economy.
Oh, absolutely. Iranian people are angry, furious, I would say. And you're absolutely right. The thing is, with the Islamic Republic running out of forex reserves, in order to meet their obligation, they kind of have to basically spend deficit. And doing that, doubling down on that, especially if the blockade continues, are we moving toward the three-digit or a high inflation scenario potentially?
I believe so. I believe we are marching at an accelerating pace, at an increasing pace towards hyperinflation. We are not in the hyperinflation realm yet, according to academic definition. The recent statistics released by Iran Central Bank and the Center of Statistics suggest the monthly inflation is somewhere between 5 to 7%, which is pretty high. It is pretty high. But for hyperinflation, you need to get into the territory of 50% or more monthly inflation. But we already are in three-digit inflation in food items. 112% is the average. In certain food items, it's actually more, like you have 200. I think in certain oil categories, it's about 200 to 300%. So it's not really a far-fetched idea. In fact, I think if nothing fundamentally changes, and I think I kind of talked about this when responding to your first question, if nothing fundamentally changes, hyperinflation, financial instability, full-fledged macroeconomic crisis is not probable. It's inevitable. It's like basic economic 101. We teach these things to undergraduate students. An Iranian economy, unfortunately, it pains me to say this, it is checking all the boxes. You have chronic fiscal deficit. You have a government that doesn't care. It doesn't have the political will to prioritize the economy. The way they are financing the war is basically inflationary because, as you just mentioned, they don't have foreign reserves, so they have to resort to this banking system and printing money. So that has inflationary effect. The attacks on Iran energy infrastructure on the South Pars is going to exacerbate the energy imbalance. So we're going to have even more severe waves of power outages and more powerful negative shocks, adverse shock to aggregate supply, further deepening the stagflation situation. The banking system, you know better than I do, banking system in Iran is already bankrupt. It's just a house of cards right now. In any normal economy, Iranian banking system should be designated as a completely bankrupt system. So this is going to get even worse for that. And this is just a few examples. And then you have all of this happening at the same time, intertwined. So, and that's why I believe if nothing fundamentally changes, we are in for a full-fledged macroeconomic crisis. And in a situation where, unfortunately, within the paradigm of Islamic Republic political apparatus, no conventional measure of economic tools is going to be helpful, because it's just going to be completely opposite to their identity, to the way they govern and to the way they handle economy or manage the economy. It's just anathema to their core underlying values. I use the word values for lack of a better word. I shouldn't use value, but you know what I mean. So, and that's really my concern. And as I said before, I don't think they really care. I really firmly believe they don't simply care about this.
Oh, absolutely, completely agree with you. And that is a very bleak image, unfortunately. Let's finish on a different note, if I may. If, sure, say, political conditions change tomorrow, what would be the most immediate reforms needed to stabilize this economy, Iran's economy, that is?
I believe one of the basic and more immediate things that needs to be done is, first, completely change the foreign policy. I know this is not really an economic policy, but economic policies in this globally connected world, economic policy and foreign policy are two sides of the same coin. So Iran needs to normalize relationship with the West. It needs to stop being this antagonizing relationship, aggressive relationship with the West, so that the sanctions can be lifted, Iran can be part of the FATF, so we can have access to capital market. There is no reason for foreign investors to come to the country. I think that may take time, but that is definitely the first step that any transition government must take. On top of it, fighting corruption. Darren Acemoglu from MIT has worked on this topic about why nations fail. I mean, people can debate about whether this is a cultural dimension or geographical dimension, natural resources, historical context. It turns out it's none of them. It has to do with the political institution and whether you have inclusive institution, the rule of law, separation of power, and basically whether, people have equal opportunity for entrepreneurship, access to capital, and the corruption. Obviously, all of these go hand in hand. Iran has one of the most corrupt economies in the world. So I think any government after the collapse, or if this regime changes for whatever reason, I don't believe it's going to happen, hypothetically, hypothetically, if they were going to change anything tomorrow, I think one of the first things is combat corruption. This is much easier said than done. The current sitting president, Pezeshkian, basically it was one of his campaign promises that he is going to fight corruption. But did that happen? Obviously not, because we have vested interests in Iran and in all sectors of the economy, ranging from the credit market, the banking system, to the environment, to the watering system in Iran. It's all like a group of oligarchs having access to these different, rents. So fighting corruption is imperative. Changing foreign policy, normalizing relationship with the West and the U.S., joining the FATF. I should not say joining FATF. I should say getting removed from the blacklist should be the top priority. On top of it, there should be changes in the structure of the central bank. The independence of the central bank should be cherished and should be forcefully enforced. Right now, Central Bank of Iran has become like a fiscal arm of the government, basically. Anytime they want anything, they just go and borrow from central bank. So that needs to be preserved. And the culture of rule of law. And obviously these things take time to, basically become institutionalized in a society. But I think the first steps are necessary immediately after the collapse, or, hypothetically, if they were going to leave tomorrow and we have a new government.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. That was very stimulating and informative. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Siamak
Of course.
Javadi.
My pleasure.
If you liked this episode, hit the like button, leave us a comment, and let us know what you think. You can also sign up for our weekly briefing newsletter at the iraninternational.com/newsletter. We also have a dedicated English website at iraninternational.com/en. Make sure to check it out.